Superbwoman Sundays at 7. I'm your host, Janet Neal, and I'm so glad that you've joined us for yet another Superbwoman interview. I do this show so that you have an opportunity to meet the amazing superb women that I've met on my path and to hear their stories about how they went from where they were to where they are today. A woman who is comfortable in her own skin, who is learning to do the things that are aligned with who she is, and as a result is putting back positive energy into the world. I don't know about you, but I think we all need that. I believe that women are the answer to what ails us. And these women are wonderful examples of what happens when women realize how powerful they really are. I invite you to sit back and relax and listen to yet another superb story. Hello and welcome to our show this evening. I'm so pleased that you're here and you are in for a treat. I have my guest tonight is Julie Lewit. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with her work, actually you probably are. Julie has an amazing story starting from a childhood in Hungary, and we're going to hear all about that in a second. And coming to this country, boy, she's done so much. I have to look at my notes because there is so much here. Julie was involved in the launch of Ms. Magazine. She worked with Women's Day Savvy Esquire magazines and was a publisher of New York Women and Mirabella. She also started Mode magazine and was a publisher with Mademoiselle. So just a couple of publications that you might have heard of out there. And the theme here, if you can notice this, it's all about women and women's empowerment, giving women a voice. And Julie is now doing that through her Operation Reinvent that she founded, and we're going to learn more about that as well. So Julie, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Janet. It's a pleasure. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for the great introduction.
Yeah, sure.
So where shall we start? Perhaps the best way to do that is my background. You touched upon the fact that I was born and raised in Hungary, and I left in 1956. Mm-hmm. My mother and I literally walked across the border, which is still terrifying to me, to even think about it. And I lived in Sweden for over 5 years. And after that stint, came to the United States with my mother, who unfortunately died a year and a half after we came to this country. So at age 19, I was all by myself.
Wow.
And it was, it was difficult. But at 19, you kind of feel that you can conquer the world. And there were choices. And my choice was to live up to my father's expectation. He died when I was 10 years old. Wow. And to make yourself, be something, do something with yourself. Mm-hmm. And I know that he wanted me to be a doctor, but that was not in the cards because I had, in order to support myself at that point, I had to work 3 or 4 jobs and go to school. And finally, the going to school went by the wayside. And one of my greatest regrets is that I have 3 years of college education, but I just never had the money to finish last year. So maybe when I'm 95, and that's the next thing that I'm going to do, is go back to school and finish that darn last year and dive with my BS degree.
There you go. Yep.
That will have to wait because right now I just don't have the time to do that.
Right.
So I actually, speaking of the 3 jobs, I started in the advertising agency business, and this was during the early 60s. If you watched Mad Men,
right?
Exactly my life.
Yeah.
So it was so difficult that it was really amazing when I watched the television. So I said, I could be in that show. That's me.
Right.
However, it was, I decided that that's not going to be me. And I never learned how to type. So this was my rebellion against typing, against being stereotyped. And the way I got the job, the first advertising job. I had 2 job offers. Job interviews. One was for Anaconda. I was a math and physics major because my language skills were not that great. When I came to this country, I did not speak English. So I went with physics and math. And so I went to interview at Anaconda, and they wanted me to be a math clerk to figure the stress and strain on wires that were hanging, between the poles. And then the second interview, a couple of hours later, was at McCann Erickson. And at McCann Erickson, the first question, the personnel person asked me, there was no such thing as human resources, as you know, is, okay, so we give a 15% discount. We get a 15% discount from the media, and we have to build it back into the bill that we bill the client. So what would you do? So I took out my trusty slide rule, and I said, you multiply the number by 11756, and that will get you back to 100. And she said, you're hired.
Wow.
So I got $5 more from McCann Erickson, and that was the start of the transition from the media, from magazines, being from the advertising agency into magazines, when Gloria Steinem and Pat Carbine called on me at NW Air. By that time, I was associate media director for the agency, and they asked me if I wanted to go over to Ms. because they were launching this magazine.
Oh, wow.
So I scratched my head for a little bit, and I said, well, do I really want to do that? And I said, well, I had enough of this agency business, and it's time to move. So I moved, and Ms. Magazine was the first one of my magazine history. And from Ms., I went to Women's Day, which was completely antithetical. And then from Women's Day I launched Savvy Magazine, which was the first incarnation, because it was reincarnated after that a number of different ways, but it was the first time. And from Savvy, I went to Esquire, and which was the only nod to the guys, to the boys. And under the aegis of Esquire, I launched New York Woman magazine as publisher. And from New York Woman, I was actually went to Mirabella to launch Mirabella as the launch publisher with Grace. And then I was publisher of Mademoiselle under Condé Nast. And then I was fired from Condé Nast, which at that time, the best thing was, if you were in a publishing business, was to be hired by Condé Nast. Right. And the second best thing was to be fired by Condé Nast.
Wow. Why's that?
Because the way they fired you, they gave you a lot of money, and you were able to kind of figure out what you're going to be doing next. And what I did next is I joined with Nancy LeWinter, and we launched Mode magazine, which was the first fashion and style magazine of real high quality for women of size. And that was, I think that of all the magazines, that's the magazine I am most proud of.
Why is that?
Because that really changed people's perception of women's bodies.
Yep.
And what is a woman worth? And I never forget, I had a conversation with an advertising agent, with a client, and she said, well, we don't advertise to those women. And I said, what do you mean by those women? And she said, but you know what I mean. I said, no, I don't know what you mean. Would you please tell me what you mean about those women? Right. So, but women who are fat. And I said, well, let me tell you something. It was a cosmetics company. I said, those women represent 68% of your sales. If you don't want to advertise to them, it's okay with me. But I'm going to have a little article in my magazine about the fact that you guys don't want their business. And let's see what happens. So it was a gutsy move.
Yeah.
I probably created an enemy for life, but I got the business. But I really feel that changed the publishing, the way Ms. Magazine changed the publishing world. The same way Mode changed the perception of magazines, fashion magazines for women.
Yeah.
Because since then, every single major magazine, whether it's Marie Claire or Vogue or More or anybody else, will always have a diversified range of women in their fashion spreads. Not always, and not all of them to all degree, but it is really has been accepted that women do come in all sizes, all shapes, and all colors.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's the background on which Operation Reinvent is built.
Okay, so we got that great background there. And so how did you transition from that publishing world to starting this organization to help women veterans transition back into civilian life?
Well, it's a little bit convoluted story. I'm going to cut to the chase. I was actually consulting for another organization and was looking at their veterans program to make it better and increase their veterans presence, their presence among veterans. And I went to it was an organization that actually rebuilt homes for everybody, for indigent, for people like that, and including veterans. And I was actually at one of their build-outs, which they do in one day. It was in Harlem, and they served lunch in the street, and I sat down at this big table that had 10, 12 guys, and many of them are veterans. And I have to tell you that their stories still make me cry. I mean, really, really awful, okay? And I said, okay, so this is terrible for the veterans, male veterans. What is it like for women? And I found that if it was bad for the men, it was horrifying for the women.
Wow.
Horrifying. So I went to a number of women's shelters, and I said, I had a very privileged background. Yes, it was self-made. I did not have any mentors, and I did it all by, pulling up my own, by bootstrapping it. And I said, I really, really want to do something. I have this background of understanding women, doing something for women, being part of this greater universe of women, and I think it's not correct. This is not right. So what could I do? With my background, I am not an educator. I'm not a pedagogue. I am not a political person. I am not any of those things that could influence government and things like that in a very positive way. But I could understand the emotion of what happens when you leave the military and you come into the civilian world. And that all through my contacts with thousands and hundreds of thousands of women over my career. So that was the genesis of Operation Reinvent. That's how it actually started. I wanted to create something for women, veterans who are leaving.
So tell our viewers a little bit more about Operation Reinvent, what it's all about. And your intention is to help these women who are coming out of the military, and tell us how you do that.
Well, it has, again, Operation Reinvent has evolved and grown, and more. It changed in a very positive way. You probably know that I have a wonderful partner, Nancy Northrop, and together, this is an equation when 1 + 1 = 5. And so we changed the whole structure of Operation Reinvent. Originally, it was going to be a one-day situation. It was mostly about makeover. Now it is, what we do is we actually have workshops in situ at various forts for those women who are slated to leave the military within 6 months and who are actively going to be looking for a full-time job. So it has geared to women who are going to be looking for professional, to have a job. And we felt that we can really make a difference by giving them the tools that gives them the possibility of pursue new horizons and new visions and new careers.
Mm-hmm.
So the first day of the 2-day workshop is a very hardcore skills building part of it. And we have speakers who come from all over the country who are really the best in class when it comes to various, both psychological and actual, empirical ways of making that transition. And many of them are actually veterans. And so the first day is all about skills building. And it includes resumes, not a resume makeover, but how do you think about selling yourself? How do you put a value on yourself?
Mm-hmm.
How is it that you're going to present yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's on social media and whether it's on LinkedIn, how do you actually want to present yourself and to your best advantage?
Mm-hmm.
And take advantage of everything that's being offered to you in terms of this transition. It's a very, very difficult transition. It is unbelievably difficult for these women because they lived in a structure that all of a sudden, structure it's kind of a gilded cage in a way, because you have everything that's there at your fingertip. On the other hand, the military has its dark underside. Right. For women, and we all know that. Mm-hmm. And you also are limited in many of the things that you can or cannot do. Mm-hmm. However, the military, the one thing that has to be said for the military, that it is gender equal. Yeah. So regardless of who you are, if you pass certain tests and you do certain moves, you are going to be equal with the men.
Right.
However, as you all know, this is not the case when you leave the military and you come into the civilian world. Right. Women are still getting paid 70% on the dollar vis-a-vis men, and women have a much greater challenge, especially these women have a greater challenge, because the minute they leave the military, their child care subsidy ends. The minute they leave the military, their insurance ends. The minute they leave the military, the housing subsidy ends. Mm-hmm. So it is really a very difficult, and most of these women that we are working with are single moms. Yeah. So it's one of those cycles that if you break out of it, you're going to be living in poverty.
Wow.
And so the first day is geared for these women to actually have the confidence to know who they are and what their contributions are, and make the change or think in terms of a bigger picture, not the military occupational system, the MOS, the fabled MOS, that if you're a gunnery sergeant, okay, so what does a gunnery sergeant do at L'Oreal or at AT&T? How to translate that and to understand what is it that what you do as opposed to what your title is.
Right. Yeah.
And we try to get that really very, very strongly across constantly. Mm-hmm. The second day, some people might think that, why are you doing that? Okay. Well, there's a very important reason why we do that. The second day is a makeover. Mm-hmm. And this is a deep-seated, I think it's a deep-seated understanding of both Nancy's and my part, and it's a deep-seated understanding of women. That women want to feel like women. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when you're in the military, the last thing you want to feel like is a woman. Mm-hmm. Because you don't want to call attention to yourself as a woman.
Right.
Because you're put into a different, yes, it is gender equal. However, if you show any kind of weakness, or you're targeted. Right. So many of the women that we talk to and work with, they wouldn't even put lotion on their bodies. Wow. Because it might call attention to their feminine side. Yeah. So the makeover is an incredibly liberating thing, because what it does, it shows them that they are beautiful women. Yes. Strong, confident women, and getting a job. Somebody said there's no such thing as a second first impression.
That's true.
So when they walk in the door, they're going to get the job because of how they present themselves. Confidence, professionally looking. So we feel that the makeover is extraordinarily important.
Yeah.
And we do that from top to toe.
Excellent. It's a wonderful program.
Thank you.
And it's really remarkable. Nancy was one of my guests, and for those of you watching this, you can go back and watch Nancy's interview next.
Yes.
So I've learned more about it, and it really is a great program. And you are really helping these women to rediscover themselves,
Yes.
which is a real gift. So
thank you.
You're helping them on their path. And that is one thing that I always talk about with Superb Women, that we realize we cannot do this by ourselves. So who helped you on your path?
Well, I think that, who helped me on my path is really my background.
Mm.
It's a strong mother who had to fend for herself after my father died. Mm-hmm. And created a business in Hungary during the height of the communist era.
Wow.
And had the courage to leave. Mm-hmm. And had the courage to pick up at age 48 and say, okay, I'm not going to have my daughter live under communism. Wow. And I think that's what is the core of all of this. Yeah. So I did not particularly have any mentors. Now, of course, I have a partner, and I had a partner at Mode magazine. I had a partner. I had bosses who were really, really good and helped me in that way. Alan Greenberg, who was my boss at Esquire, had the faith in me to give me the launch of New York Woman. But that was also, something that was really, remarkable. And John Evans, who since then died, who called me one day and he says, "How would you like to be the publisher of Mirabella?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" Oh. I was out of a job at that time.
Oh,
wow. So he had the faith in me that I could actually do that. And Grace, who I had lunch with, a first lunch, and I had to impress her, because she had the choice of who her publisher would be. And she said, "I like that firecracker Hungarian."
That's great.
So she always used to call me kiddo. No, she used to call me Julie. When she was annoyed at me, she called me kiddo. But, all of these people kind of helped open up horizons and new ventures. And even Cy Newhouse, who fired me in, I think, 2.5 seconds, the whole thing took 2.5 seconds. He helped me, run a very big magazine, and very established magazine, although it's sadly gone now. Mademoiselle is finished and done with. In fact, all of the magazines that I was involved and left died after I left them. So I don't know what it says, except for Women's Day.
That's sad, but
except for Women's Day, which is much smaller than
well, it's the whole industry, so yeah.
It's not just me. So anyway, those are the people who kind of helped me. And I think what really, really helped me is, I have to tell you a very brief story. At one point, my mother said to me, "I don't want you to be a sales lady at Bloomingdale's." Mm. And that still makes me cry, because that's kind of instilled in me ambition. Mm. I wanted to be a publisher. I did not want to be a sales rep. I wanted to be the publisher. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And every stepping stone I took is because I wanted to be the publisher of the magazine. I'm not an editorial person. I'm a business person. I wanted to be the publisher.
Excellent.
So that kind of made me who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. Focus. Yep.
Focus. And, I'm 72 years old, and
you look fabulous.
Thank you. And nothing yet. Maybe next year we have to start thinking about all this.
Only if you want to.
Right.
Exactly. So Julie, another thing that I say that I have learned from Superb Women is that they've learned to let go of the shoulds in their life. So what about you? What about that word should in your life?
There is no such word as should in my life.
And why is that?
Because I think it's a very negative word, and there's nothing positive associated with should. Should gives you grief. It should gives you second guessing yourself. Should gives you agita.
Yes.
Should gives you all kinds of negative energy that you should not have.
Yeah. I always say should brings the guilt. So we don't need it.
And we don't need to keep it on. I mean, there are plenty of opportunities to feel guilty.
Absolutely.
You don't need to create your own guilt.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been great. And so what is next for you? Tell us, what's next on the horizon for you?
Well, the next is, I do want to leave some legacy. As, we are at the point the reason I told you my age is because I think that I do have to think about what is going to be said about me when I'm 6 feet under pushing up the roses, okay? And I really wanted to, what I want to do is to make Operation Reinvent a huge success. Mm-hmm. As you know, probably from Nancy, there are 25,000 women leave the military every year. About 60% of them are going to be looking for a full-time job. So we have a huge, huge challenge to help those women. And also, one of the things that we have to do, and that's an even bigger challenge, is to put a woman's face on the word veteran.
On the what?
On the word veteran.
Oh, on the word veteran. Yes, talk about that.
A Veterans Day is coming up. It's going to be this Friday. I want you to take a look at all the ads and all the accolades and just count how many women do you see in there.
It's very
not very many. Now, it's true that women represent a minority in the military. However, it's not such a small number.
Right.
Between 15 and 19% of the military is female and growing. It's the fastest growing part of the military are women. So what we want to do is put a woman's face on the word veteran.
Excellent. Yeah, and another thing that I learned that was amazing to me is that women do not self-identify as veterans.
They don't, because there's all kinds of stigma attached with it.
Right.
The stigma is that she's a bad mom because she leaves her children behind. She's a bad wife because she goes away in Afghanistan and God knows where. It's a stigma because generally people feel that she had nothing better to do. That's not true. Most of the women who enter the military are entering because they would like to get a higher education. That's paid for. They come from socioeconomic groups that cannot afford a college education, and the only way they can get it is through the military. So the whole demographic of the military women particularly, has really evolved and changed. Yeah. So, the perspective or the perception of women in the military is still a very negative one. It's negative because they feel, well, they are lesbians, they are whatever they're thinking. Right. And we don't know what they're thinking. All we know is that you have a group of people, of veterans standing around, and there are 2 men and a woman, or 1 man and 2 women. People will come up to the man and say, thank you for your service, but ignore the women.
It's true. It's true.
So we want to change that.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, how can people find out more about Operation Reinvent?
They can go on www.operationreinvent.org, and our website is growing. We are in a very serious fundraising mode right now, if I may add that. Absolutely. Because it costs us $300, less than $1 a day, to actually put a woman through our Operation Reinvent workshop. And we would love everybody out there to adopt a woman veteran and have her be able to go through Operation Reinvent workshop, which is so meaningful and so good for them. And they so appreciate it.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, we'll have a slide at the end of this, if you forgot, with all the information on it. So, Julie, I just want to thank you so much for being my guest today. It's just been a delight to get to know you. And I'm so inspired by your work, and
Thank you.
I think you are leaving a legacy.
I hope so. I
Yeah,
hope so.
I think so.
Thank you so much, Janet. I really appreciate you having me on the show. And it was a delight talking to you this morning. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Julie. And thank you, all of you watching. Come back next week for another Superb Woman on Superb Woman Sundays at 7. And until then, have a superb week. Take care.
Thank you.
Operation Reinvent empowers you to feel comfortable in your own skin and to feel beautiful in who you are, and to walk away from the military knowing that that suit defined you for a period, but there is more to you than just a green uniform. There is so much more. Thank you.